Welcome to Business Amplified with host Kevin A. Dunlap.
This podcast is for small business owners aiming to amplify their enterprises.
Explore strategies to play a bigger game by becoming an author, public speaker, podcast host, or expanding your brand in other ways.
Elevate your business on Business Amplified.
Welcome back to Business Amplified. I am Kevin Dunlap, your host today. And today we're going to be talking with a gentleman that's going to be able to share some incredible, great information with you. His name is Peter Christian. And Peter, let's go ahead and say welcome and welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you very much for having me, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here as well. So, Peter, this is always my first question. I always ask my guests because this is how we get started. Is going to be, who are you? What is that you do, and why is it that you do it?
Okay. I'm kind of a multifaceted person, you might say. I'm an author. I've written and published 2 books. I do a number of podcasts and other speaking engagements. I am a professor, an adjunct professor teaching project management, and also have started a webinar series of various business topics. Just completed the first one on project management. I am on some educational boards at some of my old schools, Rutgers University, and also at the school that I'm teaching at, Alvernia. And in the odd hours where I have some free time, I do some fun things like kayaking or going to shows or traveling. So lots of different things going on right now.
Well, and I like that I really like 2 things that you have mentioned. Because one of the things that Business Amplified podcast is geared to do is to have people start doing something different in order to get more exposure, and thereby that's going to increase their revenue. And the 2 things that you mentioned was that you're doing a webinar series, and it's also that you've also published 2 books. Could you tell us a little bit more about your webinar series as well as your 2 books?
Okay, the webinar series is through training.com. And what it is, like I said, a series of business webinars on project management. The next one will be on operational strategic planning, on a business plan and developing that, on, what else? Talking about my 2 books. I have a sequence on each of those, and also on, I'm drawing a blank right now. I'll think of it. Basically, capital plan and how you do that, so that you have an ongoing plan that you're executing to. They got in touch with me. They were very interested in my background. We were able to set that up, and so far so good. It's working out very, very well. The teaching part at Alvernia University, I was contacted by an old friend who leads the continuing education program there. He said, I have an opportunity to do a sequence on project management, and you're the person for it. So that was great. So I've been doing that for about 5 years now, and we have certified about 70 people so far in project management, and hope to continue that for a long, long time.
So tell us, how did you fall into the role of working in project management? Was this something you did as a job? Was it something you were trained to do? Or how did you get into this?
Yeah, it was kind of odd. I never really thought about it until somebody pointed out to me that basically my career, while I was an operations manager and so forth, really dealt around project management. So I just kind of fell into it with the companies that I worked for. I worked at Air Products and Chemicals and then at Crayola Corporation. And I was always involved in changing things, making things better, adding new programs and so forth. Never really thought about it, but once I stepped back, when the person told me about that, I realized, basically my career revolved around projects and project management. I was the head of a project management group in engineering, and then as the operations manager, we ran a number of different projects, same in quality and so forth. So So I just was wrapped up in it. And then when I left the corporate world and went into consulting, of course, everything is about projects and project management then. The consulting company dealt with business improvements and worked with 300 plus companies to make improvements to their operations and to their bottom line and so forth. So I guess I just kind of fell into it and did it, not knowing at the time that I was doing it, but reflecting back, yeah, I did. So it's been a good journey.
When you got into consulting, was that working for yourself at that time?
Well, no, actually, I went back to one of my old schools, Lehigh University, that had a consulting group, and got hooked up with them. They had a group through what was called the Iacocca Institute, very famous person, Lee Iacocca, and they were doing project work with a variety of different companies. And in fact, we had done some work with them when I was at Crayola. And I hooked up with them. They said to me, "Well, what are you doing right now?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do next." And they said, "Well, why don't you do that here?" So I did, and kind of was leading their program. They were doing, no, maybe 5 to 10 projects a year, and we expanded that greatly and dealt with a number of different companies. And then when their program had some issues, myself and some of the folks I was working with started our own company in regards to projects and project management. We stayed attached to Lehigh University because a lot of the projects that we had worked on had to run through a university because we were dealing with some state funding and so forth. And then eventually we just kind of split off from them. We were doing our own work. We were doing some work with them, but got into a variety of different companies all over the country and even internationally. So it was quite an interesting journey that I had in the consulting world.
Wow. And you say you were the author of two books. What are the names of those books? What are the topics, and where can somebody find them?
Okay, well, the first one is called What About the Vermin Problem? And the genesis for that was through my working career, particularly in consulting and dealing with all these different companies and individuals. I came across some what I thought were really interesting experiences, both very positive, where companies did the right thing and listened and worked well and were very successful, and then some where they didn't listen so well and kind of went off on their own and struggled in spite of the best work that I and others could provide. And it's kind of a lesson in how based on what you take and what you do and the decisions you make, you can either be very, very successful or you can take the other path and be not so successful. So I started with that. There's a sequence of 12 stories divided up into three categories called the good, the bad, and the ugly. So thank you to Clint Eastwood for providing that format for me. And the good were the good experiences and what they did right. The bad were where they didn't do such a good job, but they could have. Okay, so there's a fine line there. And the ugly was where they really went off the tracks. They just didn't listen, did their own thing, and really ran into some problems. One of them was an instance where we were working with a company on increasing their production, expanding their facility. We came out with the final plan for them, and right in the middle of the meeting, they said, "Well, what about the vermin problem?" And we went, "What vermin problem?" Because that never came up in any of our meetings, instances, and so forth. And they said, "Well, we have vermin in the plant," which was like, "Why don't you take care of that? There's plenty of ways to do that." And it just kind of threw the entire project for a loop. So that was one of the really ugly experiences because of that, the project just kind of fell apart. They didn't do the expansion. They kind of sat and did what they did for another 3 to 5 years before they finally moved ahead again. Then that was just one of a number of instances, and I thought it was pretty catchy. Not too many people would think of that title, and certainly a lot of people say to me, "Well, is this about extermination?" And I said, "Well, it could be, if you stretch it out far enough." So that was that one. So again, it's a kind of a guide to people to Do the right things. Listen to the people you're working with. You hired them to do a job, let them do their job, and then you got to take it from there and move ahead. The second book, Influences and Influencers, while I was finishing up the first book with the person who was helping me, she said to me, well, what about your second book? And I kind of looked at her and I said, there is no second book. And she says, oh, absolutely. She says, nobody ever writes just one book. I went, okay. So I thought about it and I thought, well, the first one talked about decisions we make and why we make them and so forth. And I thought, well, why is that? Well, it's because of what happens in our working lives and in our regular lives, the things that influence us, the people that influence us, that kind of lead us to how we're going to think about things and approach them and make decisions and so forth. So I delved back into my memory banks and thought about the various people that have helped me throughout my career, that have certainly had an impact on my career, positive and negative, where I would say, I don't want to do it that way. I just don't agree with that. So I would take a different tact. And they kind of tie together. Okay, they weren't intended to, but they kind of. And actually, Influences and Influencers probably should have been the first book about why we think the way we do, and then into, how people act and react. But it doesn't matter. Whichever way you want to read them, is fine. And they have applications outside of business. They work into our regular everyday lives because again, there are people who influence us, things that happen that impact us, cause us to think the way we do, act the way we do, make our decisions, live our lives, and so forth. So I think they have applications in both sides of both your personal life and also your business life.
Did the books help you get more focus on your project management or consulting businesses, or were they possibly even like lead magnets where people can learn more about what it is that you're teaching?
Well, they were the result of my consulting experience, certainly. It got me to think more about it. So, in any engagements I've had since then, certainly I can reflect back on that and think about those things. But I see it mostly as a help to other people. You gain a lot of knowledge and experience through your working career. And then to just kind of tuck that away and not share it with people, I think is really a little selfish, because you can help other people. You can keep them from making maybe some of the same mistakes you made, provide good guidance to them, let them realize that they're not all alone and they're not experiencing some of the problems they think they are. Other people have experienced them too, maybe not the same people and companies and whatever. But we have a lot of shared experiences, and I've heard that from people that have read the books. They said, "Gee, I wish I had had this 10 years ago." Well, you didn't, but you got it now, so deal with it, and make the most. And they say, I know somebody who's like, the person that you mentioned or the company you mentioned or whatever the case may be. And here's what my feeling was. So that's what the drive is right now, is to try to help other people, to provide a good guide to them, uh, to provide the experience and knowledge that I've gained over the time, and to say, here it is, now you take it and you do what you want with it. Here's other pieces that you can use to hopefully make your life and your career better.
Well, and that's one thing I want to piggyback on what Peter just said is that writing a book, and I've written 4 books. So writing a book, the thing is, the knowledge that you have, the knowledge that you're taking for granted, that you think other people know, that you've learned over the years, that if you could put into a book to help people that have not gone through those experiences, like he said, he had the one person who read his book that said, "I wish I'd have read. I knew this 10 years ago."
Yeah.
When I wrote my first book, at that time, I just wanted to become an author. And for those of you who've listened to our podcast before, I've talked about this several times. And at that time, for those of you that have not heard it, and I know Peter has not heard this, is this was 2015, and I was I was working in real estate, and more specifically, I was my specialty, my go-to system was doing a lease option or a rent to own homes. So I wrote a book called Lease Options Made Easy. And that, that allowed me to start speaking on stages. That allowed me to go to different real estate investment clubs. That gave me clout over other people. So writing that first book was phenomenal. Now, I wrote that book for the average American person to read so they understood lease options and then how to get American financing, maybe VA financing. Oddly enough, that book sells more frequently in the UK than it does in the United States. So the principles are still the same, even though the loan names or stuff like that are going to be different. So the thing is, you never know who who your audience is going to be. And for those of you that are not watching the video, Peter is shaking his head that he agree. He's shaking his head no, but he's agreeing with me by saying that people do not know, what I just said. Looks like he has something to say. So Peter, go right ahead.
Yep, you just never know who you're going to impact. So you put it out there, and hopefully you impact a number of people. But even if you just impact one, that's great, because that's one person that you've helped, that you've given them information that they can use now to improve themselves and what they're doing. And you just never know who that individual is. You think that you're going to help in one area, and it winds up being a completely different area. Like you said, the UK, who would have thought? But hey, it doesn't matter. Wherever, people are people. We have some of the same needs and requirements, and you get it out there, and you just see who picks it up and deals with it then.
The second thing that Peter shared, and I want to go into this right now, is that he was saying that he's at the time of this recording, he's starting a webinar series. Could
Yes.
you tell us a little bit about your webinar series? I know you said it was on training.com, or
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right. That's correct. Yep, I just got through the first one on project management. I thought that was a good lead in, since that's what I've been doing quite a bit. And the next one will be on operational strategic planning. And again, what I'm doing is trying to provide out to people my experiences, how you go about doing that, whether it's project management or operational strategic planning, or creating a business plan, why they're important, what you do about them, and so forth. Um, Kind of a guide to, you might say. All right, and that will certainly give them more information that they have, will help them to understand why it's important to do the different things, the tools to use, how to go about it, the structure, so that you are structured and you just don't fling something out there and deal with it. So I was very interested when they got in touch with me. Said, yeah, I can do that. So I sat down, thought about, in this case, it was 8 things. I'm doing 8 webinars that I could talk about, and we got started. So it's been really good so far. And again, it's my way of kind of giving back to people. Granted, I do get some remuneration from it, but that's not the big thing. The big thing is to provide, again, like I said, my experience and my knowledge to people, that hopefully will help them, because they may be struggling in a particular area, and this hopefully gets them on the right path, and then they can go from there.
Who's the ideal attendee for your webinar? Is it somebody starting out in business, somebody who has maybe 5 or 7 employees? Now, who's the ideal attendee that you're trying to attract?
You hate to say everybody, because I remember that saying, one size fits all, and then I add to that and it fits badly. So I'm not trying to do that. But I think it depends on where you're at. If you're starting out and you don't have any background, certainly that can be a help to you. If you've been in it for a bit, but you're struggling and you're not quite sure what to do next, that can be a help to you. And it could also be somebody who's been in it for a while, but they say, excuse me, I just want to find out what the latest things are that are happening, if I'm doing everything correctly, if there's anything that I'm missing, that I could do differently or a little bit better. So I think at each stage, there can be a help to people depending on what you take from it. So I would kind of say, if I had to pick one, it would be the starter or the early stage person who's just getting into that particular area. But it can be a help to the other folks as well. There's plenty of good information in there.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, is this going to be on a weekly or a monthly basis?
I'm doing about two a month. Okay, so I started in March. It will end in June of 2024, and then we'll see where it goes from there, and whether we do any repeats or they say come up with the next date that you want to talk about. I haven't really thought about it right now. I'm focusing on the ones that I did, but right now it'll be about a 4 month routine.
Okay. And I've actually gone through something very similar to what Peter's going through. In 2023 and early 2024, I had a bi-weekly or twice a month a training series. It was a meetup group that I have or had. And I think we came up with 29 different episodes. And the thing is, I mean, it was kind of hard to come up with the kind of new content all the time. But the thing is, you also have to look at the fact that, hey, if they missed the first one, maybe they would catch it again 5 months from now. You know, if this is a 4 month sequence or 4 months from now, and just do a repeater, just like you see in college. I mean, people are coming to you at different stages. So if you're looking at doing a webinar, go ahead and I would say go ahead and come up with come up with a webinar that you're going to keep repeating over and over and over again until you have one that's completely converting it as well as educational. This is what I call in my programs what I call the CTAO method, CTAO method. You create something, you test it, and then after you test it and you test it and you test it and see what works and find out weed out the things that are not working and put in things that are working. And then after you've done that, then you move to the third letter, which is A, which is automate. So now how can you put this maybe as something that's what is known as evergreen or something that you can have it come that you probably even record, and now you just hit the play button, and then all you have to do is the marketing. And then once that is converting well, then you move into the O, which is how do you optimize? So how can Peter make, hey, Kevin, I want to be on your list. I want because you cross promote my stuff, and we will do some kind of affiliate marketing. So when you're coming up with a webinar, and Peter is in the perfect position right now because he's creating his first 8 courses. Does he create a 9 through 12 or 9 through 16? Or does he do 1 through 8 again and 1 through 8 again? And maybe sometime in the future do 9 through 16. And now he has 2 sets going on. So,
Yep.
so Peter is at the perfect stage right now, and he's pushing his comfort zone by doing this. Now he's under the pressure to come up with all this content. He's under the pressure to market this stuff and to get the people to attend, and then he's got to teach it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. The
but the thing
most
is,
important part.
he's
Yeah.
pushing his comfort zone by doing something like this.
Sure. Yep. Yep. Always, always willing to try something new. Hadn't really thought about it. The opportunity presented itself. We had lots of conversations, and it all worked out. So off we went.
And I'm going to give the listeners some advice because this is exactly what I did. I'm going to offer this to Peter as well, but this is mainly for the listeners. If you're having a hard time coming up with content, there's a very simple process that you can use to come up with your content. Peter, would you be interested in hearing that? Yes, it's pretty simple.
Uh, Basically, just sit and reflect back on what it is that you've been doing. If you paid attention to what you're doing and you know it and you know it well, just put your thoughts down, start, and it doesn't have to be perfect for starters. You write down what you think, and then you go back and you look at it and you make changes, and you look at it again and you make changes. And then in a lot of cases, you give it to somebody who has no idea or not a big idea of what you're saying or doing, and you say to them, take a look at this, and does it make sense to you? And if it does, then if they say, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, I don't have the expertise in there, but I know exactly what it is that you're trying to get across, then you've got it. If they go, I have no clue what you're talking about, then you know that it's not the right thing, and you've got to get back to people, because again, you're not trying to talk over people's heads. You're trying to communicate information to them. And when they don't have the background, but they can take it and they can look at it and they can get an understanding from it, then you know that you're on the right track. And that's what you're trying to do, because you're trying to get across to people who need help, okay? And you're not trying to talk beyond them or above them. You don't throw in all the jargon and stuff. And I tend to do that on occasion too, and I get corrected about that because it comes naturally to me when you've been involved in consulting or teaching or whatever. You use some pet words and so forth, and that might not resound with people. So you need to put it in terms that they understand, and then you can throw the jargon and say, now use, such and such in order to reflect that. But basically, it's just sitting down, being true to yourself, putting down the thoughts of the stuff that you've done. Okay, in a lot of cases, we think about things, but we never write them down. Well, now you're writing them down, and now you're communicating them to other people. And if you do that and do that well and go through those steps of editing and getting individuals to take a look at it and give comments on it, you're doing a very, very good job, and you should be pretty successful.
And I'm going to second that because I'm going to assume when Peter, when you wrote your first book,
Mhm.
you did not publish your first draft. You went back and you edited it, and you edited it several times.
Yeah, and I had an editor, okay? And again, he was not an expert in the area, but he would question things. And after a while, you go, oh gosh. But his points were very, very good because he was coming at it from the outside. He was not an expert in the area. And he's saying, I don't quite understand what you're saying here, or can you phrase it differently, or what? And it made it so much better.
Mhm.
So definitely, if you're writing, and I'm sure you did that too, you have an editor, okay, and that person has been through the mill, so they know what works and what doesn't work, and they help you. Nobody said you have to do everything on your own. There's plenty of people out there who can help you, just as you're trying to provide help to people. So use it, okay, because they're good people. And I had an excellent editor. He did a great job for me on both of the books. So I was very, very happy with that.
So as you can see, the process is still the same. When you, let's say you write your first book or second, whichever book it is, you write your first webinar, you write your first public, your 30-minute talk, you write your first whatever. The thing is, you have to go there and have other people either listen to it, consume it, and be able to give you feedback. I
Yep.
know, so I remember back when I was in college, and this was back a long time ago, this is the early 90s. And I took a course. I had to take a chemistry one and chemistry two, and I'm very proud of myself. That I am not going to drop any courses. I am not just. I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to stick it through. And then the guy that was teaching Chem one, this guy knew his chemistry. He was like double doctor. I'm like he was way up there, but he could not teach a basic level course because he was using acronyms. He already made assumptions on stuff that we had not even covered. Like, he goes, well, the modality of this, like, well, we don't talk about modalities until chapter 3. We're in chapter 1. So he was so smart that he could not teach that level of
Mm,
course. So I dropped that course. And
yeah.
then I took Chem 1 the following semester, which was odd because I was taking Chem 1 in the second semester. Usually you take it first, second, instead of second, first.
Yep.
So I was off on that, but I was glad that I did, and that taught me a lot in my life. Dropping this course, like sometimes you can be talking over somebody's head. For an example, I've worked with the federal government before. I've worked with other corporations that absolutely love using acronyms. There's this acronyms jargon, the jargon of that company, and something like still have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what a LC2KR is. What is that again? I just have no idea. But for you, you understand it. The thing is, you do sometimes, I don't want to say dumb it down, but you have to make it more, um, uh, what do you want to call it, comprehensible to somebody that's a layman or
Yep.
laywoman, if you want to get
Yep.
generic specific.
I excuse me. I have a little bit of a cold, so just bear with me. But in project management, one of the key things, maybe the key thing that I think that makes you a successful project manager is communication. And what I say to people is there's a multi-step approach to communication. You send out some message to somebody, whether it's like we're doing here, or texting, or email, or document, or whatever the case may be. Well, that's part one. Okay, you still haven't communicated as far as I'm concerned. You just sent out something. The next part is to check with the person and say, Kevin, did you get what I said? Did you read it? If you didn't get it for some reason, and we all know that there were technical glitches and so forth, or you didn't get a chance to read it, well, please do. Okay, that's part two. Number three then is, okay, did you understand it? Did you understand what I was saying? And there may be some questions, okay, because no matter how clear we try to make things, people interpret things differently. So, what did you get out of it? Okay. And we come to an agreement as to what it was I was trying to get across. And then four is, well, do you agree with everything? All right. Because just because I said it doesn't mean it's an unwritten fact, okay, that you have to accept. Do you agree with it? And you may say, well, I agree with most of the stuff, but I don't agree with this point or what. So, okay, let's talk about that. What is it you don't understand or agree with or whatever the case may be? And we get that resolved. Okay, now do we have a final communication? And if we do, what are we going to do about it? I may have asked you to do something, or I may have said, here's what I'm going to do. Whatever. Do we have an agreement, and where do we go from here? You do those 5 steps, and you've got a communication. You leave any of them out, and you haven't really communicated. And unfortunately, too many people stop at step one. They send something out, and they say, well, I communicated to so and so. No, you did. You sent them something. All right. The communication only occurs when you've gone through all those other steps and you have an agreement and you're taking an action on it. And if you don't, then you got a problem. And that's where projects fail or succeed depending on what the communication is, what the end result is, and what people do about things. And that's the same in true in outside of the business world, in real life, communicating with people. Like you said, I was shaking my head like this or like this. Well, that tells you whether people are agreeing with you or not agreeing with you, whether they're understanding, whatever the case may be. And if you don't have that understanding or agreement, then you need to kind of go back and talk about it. Okay. And I've modified my position on certain things where people have given me the, no, I don't think so, or I think there's a better way. But if they're going like this and I go, now, are you sure? And they go, yeah, now I'm going to hold you to it. All right. Because you told me you understood and you agreed. So where do we go from here? Let's put the plan together and let's do it then.
And what have you seen as maybe some of your biggest challenges that you've gone through, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Somewhere you deal with a client who thinks that they know everything, and you kind of shake your head and go, "Well, why am I here then if you know everything and everything is so great?" Okay. Granted, it may be their business that they started, it's their baby. You can certainly understand that, but things aren't going well, and you need to listen now, okay, and make some of the changes that I'm here to influence you on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, hiring somebody to help you, and the key word there is help, not do it for you, uh, then you've got to take that help and you got to do something with it because you're going to determine whether you're going to be successful or not. That individual cannot make you successful on his or her own. They may for a very short time, but once they walk out the door, if you're that dependent on them, it'll all fall apart. So I'd say that was a big one, was people who really weren't committed, thought they knew everything, okay, were trying to impress me with what they knew. You're paying me to impress me to tell you what you know. That's kind of silliness, that just doesn't make any sense. Others got themselves in such a deep, deep hole that there was no way that they were going to dig themselves out. I am not the kind of person who is a turnaround artist where a company is, a month or two away from closing their door and has to take drastic action in order to improve or to even survive. If you've gotten to that point now. Mine is where you're struggling a bit, and I can help you to manage and turn things around and make you more successful than you've been. Okay. Uh, and if you've gotten to the point where you're near death's door, Sorry, that's just not in my DNA because that's craziness, and in a lot of cases it doesn't work anyway. When you've gotten that far down the road, then that's a problem, and I'm not sure anybody can help you at that point. So I'd say those are two big things, okay? And that's why whenever I would start a new engagement, the first thing I'd say is, well, what do you really think your problem is? Okay, what is it that keeps you awake at night, worrying? And because sometimes it's not what they think the real problem is. And then I don't just take it from there. I go to the people who are working for them and I ask the same thing. Well, what do you think the problem is? And sometimes you hear a completely different answer than what you got from the owner, which is another problem area, a red flag, because if they're not on the same page and the owner thinks the problem is one thing and the employees think it's a different thing, ooh, you got to work through that. Sometimes the owner is the problem because he or she isn't listening. They're not doing the things that are necessary. And now you've got to convince them to do that, which can be very, very difficult. I think the other thing is that by and large, we as people are adverse to change. Okay, even though we know we're doing something and it's not 100% right and there's a problem involved, we are so comfortable. We've gotten into a comfort zone that we don't want to change. It's kind of that dealing with the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. Uh, so even though they say they want to change, they really don't want to change. They're not willing to make the change that's necessary, and that's a problem. So I'd say those were the big things in dealing with clients that were problems that I came across and were the biggest challenges.
Well, one word that kept popping in my head is word that you did not say, but it's kind of what you hinted at
Hmm.
is the client's implementation of the solution or the advice that you're giving them.
Yes. Yeah, I had one particular instance where we were working with a company. They brought a new person and a manager who was into the Lean Six Sigma, blah, 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 which is fine. Okay. I understand it. I deal with it, but I'm not the biggest proponent of it. So we got to the end of the project. We said to them, here's all our recommendations. We want you to put the dollar figures that you feel once they're implemented will benefit the company. That was about a $5 million company, and they had about a $500,000 worth of what they identified as financial improvements or savings there. So that's 10% of the business. That's pretty darn good. So time and typically like to then do the next project, which is to help them to do the implementation. They said, no, no, we got it. Everything is fine. Okay, great. Go away. As I mentioned in the consulting arena I was in, we dealt with the state and some state funding. So the fellow who was involved in that calls me one day, maybe about 9, 12 months later, and he says, that company is really, really disappointed with you and what you did. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? He says, well, they've gotten zero improvement. They've recognized $0 benefit. I said, really? I said, because they said that they, identified $500,000. I said, so what did they implement? He says, nothing. And I sat there and I looked and I said, nothing? So they implemented nothing and they are disappointed in me because they have gotten zero savings. I said, why are we having this conversation? Problem isn't with me. The problem is with them. They said that they could handle it. I wanted to help them. They said, no, no, we got. Well, they kind of what this person who was the Lean Six Sigma went back to the process. Okay, forget about the end results. They were more hung up on the process, and they weren't entirely thrilled the process we did to get to where we got to. Well, get over yourself. I mean, really. The process, yeah, it's important, but it's not the end all do all. The end result is what you get out of it, okay? If you find out what the real problems are and what the real solutions are, and you implement them and you get the results, that's what matters. And how you got there, it matters to a degree, but guess what? It's not the most important thing. Well, that's what they were hung up on was the process. So being hung up on the process, they didn't do any of the implementation. And I just shook my head and I said, they got a major problem and it's not us. Okay. They signed off on it. They said, yeah, they understood the new thing, and then they didn't do anything about it. So you need to go back and you need to talk to them and kind of shake them up a bit. I said, and if they want us to come back in, we'll be happy to help them to implement. Well, guess what? That didn't happen. So now they weren't one of the ones I talked about in my book, but I still talk about them as an example because you just shake your head and go, there's one thing about insanity where you do the same thing over and over again, you expect a different result. Well, insanity is also when you know what the problem is and you don't do anything about it. And you know how to solve it, but you don't do anything about it. That's insanity to me. So there's a big
And
example. I'm
well,
sorry.
I know that I have a course that's called Roadmap for Business Success, and I talk
Hmm.
exactly what you're talking about, but I use different words.
Okay.
I'll say that there are the people that are say have I call it, this is my top of mind problem. This is what's keeping me up at night. This is what I'm dwelling on. This is what that I'm worried about. However, usually that top of mind problem is actually a symptom of a yet another different problem. I
Yep.
call it your specific problem.
Yep.
Because they'll come to you and say, "Hey, I've got this top of mind problem," but then after I sit down with us and say, "Hey, this is just a symptom. Here's your unrealized actual problem." That's what I call it, your unrealized actual problem.
Yep.
It's like you say, "Hey, I'm going to go to the doctor. I've got this pain in my arm, blah blah blah," and you're saying the pain in the arm, and the doctor says, "Yeah, you've got I don't know." It's something else that's a lot bigger. You got leprosy. You've got this huge thing that's going. We got to focus on the leprosy in this particular example versus
Sure.
the pain in the arm. The pain in
Yep.
the arm was just a symptom, and
Yep.
that's how I see a lot of people working on is like, hey, I don't care what the doctor said. I don't care what what Peter said or what Kevin is saying. I want to keep focusing on my top of mind problems, not realizing that is the wrong problem to be focusing on.
Yep. Yep. And that happens too often with clients because there are a number of different things that can cause problems. Okay. And you have to sort out what the biggies are. All right. Pareto analysis, 20% of the problems, when solved, give you 80% of the results. That's what you go after. But too often people go after the easy, simple stuff that gets them very little in return. Okay, and but they spend a lot of time on it, and then they say, "Well, I spent all this time and I didn't get the return." Well, yeah, because you solved a problem, but not the major problem, not the big problem, not the one that was going to get you the most return for it. And that's what you do as a consultant is you help them to realize that and to focus in on the biggies. All right. But they don't realize that sometimes. Again, they want to do the simple thing. They think that we have magic wands and we just wave them and everything is hunky dory. It doesn't work that way. Solving problems is hard work, all right? And you have to know what the real problem is. We used to call it root cause analysis, what the real cause of the problem is, and you got to delve down sometimes. It's not the symptom. It's what's
Yeah.
really causing the problem that you have to solve.
Well, and on a grander scale, in that same roadmap for business success course, I call something for as far as solutions go is what I call the spiral revenue model or the spiral model.
Hmm.
And basically, what that talks about is that whenever you are starting to solve problems and you actually get solutions to those solutions will often cause other problems that need to
Hmm.
be focused on as well.
Yep.
And in that example, just to do a visual, and this is a visual that I went through back in 2010, is I wanted to lose 80 pounds
Mm.
or 70 pounds in 3 months. And without any surgery operation, it was just going to be working out. Now, after going through all of that, and let's say I got down from 240 to 180, so I only lost 60 pounds. I had new problems that came up. Number one, I got to maintain that weight. Number two, I went from a double XL down to a medium. I've got a whole new wardrobe that I have to go and get. And these other problems will develop. That's just the nature of the beast. For an example, Peter could say, "Hey, I got you to the extra $500,000, but now we got to worry about taxes. Now, do we have to now do the proper tax planning on this, or or whatever that new problem is going to be?" So in most cases, most solutions will cause other problems that you could also be working on them with them. Like for an example, writing that book. Okay, now you got the book out there. You got the editor out there. You are going to go publish. You're going to go self-publish. Or, whatever problems that you're going to be going through. These are all different problems that are going to be developed in the solution that you're trying to create. Peter, we're running a little long here.
Okay.
So if our listeners or our viewers are interested in finding more about your webinar, about your books, or possibly want to work with you, what's one of the best ways for them to get in contact with you? Either your social media channels, a landing page, a calendar link, a website, or anything along those lines.
Okay. Three ways. Number one, I'm on LinkedIn. So look for Peter Christian, author, consultant, professor, whatever. And you will see a whole bunch of stuff on me. And there's also a way that you can write to me and say, I would like to talk to you more, contact, how can we do that? So that's number one. Number two, I have a website. It's PHC Publications. LLC. So you can go on there and you can find me. And again, there is a way that you can send me a note and say, I'd like to talk to you or whatever the case may be. And the third way is my email address, which are my initials PH and then my last name Christian, the number 53 at gmail.com. So any one of those three, you can get in touch with me and say, I heard you on the webinar. I have some points that I think I would like to make with you that I agree with, or I don't agree with, or I'd like elaboration, or whatever the case may be, or I'd like to just discuss, a problem with you and see what you think. Whatever the case may be, whatever is important to you, send me a note and we'll go from there.
Now, these are going to be in the show notes, regardless if you're on YouTube or Amazon Music or whichever platform that you're acquiring this. And if I remember this correctly, he said his website was at www.phcpublications.llc.com. You can reach him on LinkedIn as Peter Christian. And then also you can find him by email, or if you go to LinkedIn, obviously you can send him a private message on there. You can connect with him there, or his email is phchristian@gmail.com. Did I get all
Yep,
that correctly?
you got it.
Yeah, for those of you that are out there listening to this show, and this is our little plug that we usually do. If you're listening to this show, if you know somebody who might be a good guest, or if you think you would like to be try to audition to be a guest, just go to our website at businessamplified.net/pre-interview. There's no dash in there. So again, that's businessamplified.net/pre-interview. Now, Peter, before we go, is there any last words that you or anything else that you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
Make sure that if you want to make changes, if you want to improve, that you're committed to doing it and then do it. All right. Don't say you're committed because I hear that too often from people, but it's the actions, it's not the words. Okay. And realize that at the end of the day, you're responsible for your success or your failure. You can have all the help you want in the world, and I do agree that you should get help, but they are there, like I said, to help you, not to do it for you. If you are depending on somebody else to make you successful, you're barking up the wrong tree. Only you can make yourself successful. They can help you, they can provide the advice, they can do whatever for a short space of time. But when they walk away from it, if you don't continue to do what you were instructed to do or recommended to do, whatever the case may be, it's going to fail. So make sure that you understand what you've agreed to, that you're willing to do it, and then go do it. The people who are will be successful. The people who aren't will continue to struggle. You may have a degree of success. You might not close your doors, but that may happen as well. So be committed. All right. And I always ask the client, are you going to be committed? And they kind of give me that look like, well, yeah, because I'm paying you. And I say, you'd be amazed how many people pay me and then don't follow through. So anyway, so do that and you will be successful.
So in a nutshell, he says, get the proper advice from the right person, and then implement what that person says.
Yep.
You have to take action.
Yep.
Get the advice, take action. And I'm going to go. I don't want to go too far into this. The third thing I would say possibly even have somebody hold you accountable.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Your wife, your husband, they're good at it. Mine does.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, again, I want to say thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
My pleasure. Well, and guys, you know the phrase. Until next time, be amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to another empowering episode of Business Amplified with Kevin A. Dunlap.
If you found value in today's insights, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast.
Keep amplifying your business. And remember, your success journey is our inspiration.
Until next time on Business Amplified, go out there and make your business thrive.